Okay, so this video is basically piggybacking off of the video that I made covering Georgia Tech's victory over Florida State yesterday, but this time it's going to be more about the Gators rather than it is about either Georgia Tech or Florida State. Now, real quick on Florida State, I know I trolled Florida State enough about what happened yesterday, but I will say this. While I troll, I understand that their season is not officially over yet. It's a 12-game football season. They still have 11 football games to go. They and plus the college football playoff is 12 teams, so the margin for error is a lot bigger this year than it would be in previous years under the 14 format. Had Georgia Tech would have beaten Florida State in a 14 playoff format, Florida State's chances of making the playoffs would already be pretty much hanging by a thread at this point because of the teams that they still have left on the season. But if you hear a siren, there's a siren in the background. I think an ambulance is driving by. But anyways, Florida State season is not officially, it's still not technically over. They still have a long way to go, so maybe they can recover and salvage what's left of their season this year. The ACC is still a weak conference, so it's not like they have the hardest road to embark on. But they still have some tough opponents, Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame, and who knows how Florida will be at the end of this season, in addition to all the other games that they have in between those four opponents. But I wanted to take that loss yesterday for Florida State and see how I can spin into Florida, into it being a Florida video. And what I want to say is that this is why the football games are played. You can't just solely rely on preseason Associated Press top 25 rankings, because all it is really just predictions rather than knowing what your team is currently at the point. Because as of right now, Florida State is still rated in the top 10. Needless to say, they will not be in the top 10 after week one is over. But I will say, if Florida State looks this bad against Georgia Tech, then there's a possibility that as Florida's season progresses on, the schedule may not be as tough as once perceived, right? Because Florida State, along with Florida State, Ole Miss, LSU, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Miami, Florida State, along with 7 other football teams on Florida's schedule, is rated in the top 25. FSU is one of the 4 teams that's rated in the top 10. Obviously, they're not going to be in that after this week. If Florida were to have a good season this year and win more games than last year, maybe win more games than they have in Billy Napier's first 2 seasons, there's a chance that a football team would have to fall off and not be as good as once believed. And maybe and it looks like right now, because they're the only team on this list that has played, it looks like Florida State could be that team that maybe that falls off, which is what I expected from them when you lose all the talent that they lost. So for Florida, if Florida State looks bad right out of the gate, we'll see how they look at the end of the season. But if Florida State is struggling right out of the gate, then you should be looking at the game thinking, well, if Georgia Tech can beat these guys, we certainly have the talent to beat these guys, and we've been close to beating these guys the last 2 years. We just couldn't seal the deal. And if you can look at Florida State like that, then why can't you look at teams like Miami like that way, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, Tennessee, Kentucky? The Georgia Tech win, in my opinion, could possibly shed some light on Florida's season and make Florida realize, hey, these teams are human just like us, and they can be beaten just like us. And we can certainly go toe to toe with a lot of these teams that are on our schedule, especially with Miami and Florida State and UCF, with the teams within our own state. And we can certainly go toe to toe and possibly beat these guys straight up. And if you're a Florida fan, that loss for Florida State should not only make you happy, because obviously as Gator fans we hate Florida State, but we should look at it as like, okay, if Georgia Tech can pull off a big victory like that, we can certainly pull off a big victory like that, because we have the talent, we have the players, we have more depth at different positions than Georgia Tech, and obviously we are familiar with teams like a Florida State uh, and our conference opponents as well, and we should be able to go onto the football field and get some nice wins for our program. So it was a very good win for Georgia Tech, and maybe that could be an omen for how Florida State looks at the end of the year. Florida State, you better you better get going. You better get it together fast because your season's gonna heat up when it gets to late September and October. And for Florida, you should be looking at it as okay. That's a sign that good things can't happen for us this season. You know, we're the underdog in a lot of games, and Georgia Tech was an underdog yesterday, and they just pulled off a big victory. So if they can do that, you know, why can't us? Why can't we? We can do the same thing. So that being said, Saturday, August 31st, Florida plays Miami at 3:30 in the Swamp on ABC. It should be a pretty good game. And as much as Miami fans and us Florida fans are laughing at Florida State for their loss yesterday, I'm sure Florida State fans are going to be sitting watching this game with a bucket full of popcorn, ready to laugh at whichever one of their in-state rivals lose that game. So, but hey, at least we could say it wasn't to Georgia Tech.